Hey wine lovers, we're here today to discuss the state of play of Chardonnay in South Africa. This is an exceptionally strong category in South African wine. And why is it? The critics do love it. In the last trophy wine show, Chardonnay did exceptionally well. Tim Atkin, in his last results, made his white wine discovery of the year, a Chardonnay from the Karoo made by Johan Kruger. And in the Platters results, they always do exceptionally well, and it's a very strong category, a very diverse category. To celebrate this and to drive the category forward, there's a new South African Chardonnay Association that's also just been formed. Now, to discuss this, to discuss Chardonnay and the association briefly, I have with me today Johan Kruger, who's one of the founding members, and Andre Morgenthal, who's going to be helping to drive the messaging around the Chardonnay Association of South Africa. So stand by, we've got some great Chardonnays to talk about, and if you come to the shop, you can buy them to taste too.
First and foremost, Chardonnay is my favorite cultivar, needless to say. And then I do believe that Chardonnay is the greatest translator of terroir. So if you look at worldwide examples and then translate that back to South Africa, we make Chardonnays from all over the Western Cape as well as the Northern Cape. And if you even look at two producers making Chardonnay from the same vineyard, there's this very specific term called typicity. And Chardonnay's got this ability to memorize where it grows and give it back in the glass to the consumer in the final day, much more like any other variety. So be it Hemel and Ader Valley, Stellenbosch, Pietermaritzkloof, even Sutherland in the Northern Cape, each vineyard block has got this ability to really tell you in the glass where it comes from, and that makes Chardonnay very attractive for me.
Now in the shop at Wine Village, we find people come to our Chardonnay shelf is very big. We're obviously in the Hemel and Ader, so we're proudly Hemel and Ader, but not only. And we have a great variety of South African Chardonnays. But the single question that I get asked more often than not is, can you give me a rich, buttery style of Chardonnay? Tell me more about why it seems that the Cape has moved, if not away from, but has backed away from that style.
Sure, yeah, it's a good question. I think back in the 90s, early 2000s, the whole world went over oak, over butter on Chardonnay, and that the wines became cloy, over oaked, and as Gary Jordan used to say, you don't want to have to use a crowbar to get to the fruit of the wine when it comes to oaked Chardonnay. So I think in due course, winemakers and producers have adapted to let the vineyard speak and rather the winery. It's interesting. Our Dutch importer Xavier Kat, who's been in his family in the wine business for 150 years, asked me earlier this year, interesting question. He said, you know, in the 2000s, we all threw away the concrete, chucked out the big barrels, forgot about the vineyards, and moved ultra high-tech in the winery. And in the past 5 to 8 years, the opposite happened again, where winemakers started realizing that you can only do so much with technology when it comes to quality wine, and you need to get back to the vineyard in order to give better grapes, in order to make better wine. And to achieve that, you need to go back to concrete and bigger oak vessels like Foudre and bigger barrels. So it's almost back to tradition, where the vineyard, the typicity of the vineyard is more respected than fancy tools in the winery. And one of those fancy tools in the winery, unfortunately, was over-oaking Chardonnay. So luckily, we've moved away from there. And I think consumers also appreciate fresher styles of Chardonnay. There's still the traditional, richer, fuller, buttery style Chardonnays that do well in certain markets or certain segments for us. You can almost pinpoint it to neighborhoods in Cape Town, like the southern suburbs, like their rich old school Chardonnays, and other parts want the fresher styles again. So there's horses for courses, but the general trend is more towards the cleaner, styles of Chardonnay, which tells you where they come from, because that's what Chardonnay is all about.
Right, so you're speaking to Chardonnay is a lovely white wine that's more of a general wine versus site-specific, site-expressive, fine Chardonnays,
Yes.
which are clearly speaking to the personality of where they come from.
Yes.
Yeah, which is your, what gets you up in the morning.
As well as lamb chops. I mean, you can buy lamb chops from any grocer, from a lamb that's been walking around here in the suburbs, or you can really appreciate Karoo lamb, which is now certified, and you taste it in the meat, and certainly so more so in great Chardonnay wines that was made in the vineyard.
Okay. Well, you did neatly move to food there, Johan, and I know that you're a man who enjoys fine food. Well, not in the sense fancy, but just good food.
Yes.
What would you put with, I'm speaking very broadly now, but with a Chardonnay like the Saint-Chen we're drinking now, which is the completely unwooded, fermented in concrete.
Yes.
What would you put with a unwooded Chardonnay, and what would you put with a oaked Chardonnay? Your first go-to.
Yeah, my go-to would be the cleaner, fresher the Chardonnay, the cleaner, fresher the seafood. We like to go to Jacob's Bay, so fresh silverfish out of the ocean directly on the grid with the sunshine while the waves are making their beautiful sounds in the background. It's just fantastic. The sunshine coming from Piccaninny's Grove, which is West Coast, really resonates with this seafood that we get from there. And then as you go higher up to the more serious styles of Chardonnay, you head towards shellfish. So you'll start with mussels, scallops, and if you really have a great Chardonnay, you end up with abalone, sustainably farmed, not poached, and of course lobster or kreef, which is what we all really enjoy with great Chardonnay.
Andre Morgenthal, you are spearheading the South African Chardonnay Association. What is the aim of the association, and how do you want to take the message to the people?
Well, first and foremost, it's to raise the image of quality Chardonnay, not only locally but internationally. It's clear that there's a pull in the market for South African Chardonnay in context with other countries. And what I see with my experience through my work at Wines of South Africa and the Old Wine Project, that when there's a collective, then as you said, you sort of funnel the information. There's one person to contact. The collective stands together and you communicate one message, and is underpinned by the stories. And as Johan said, Chardonnay has always been, for me, underestimated and undervalued. And if you look at sales in terms of volume and value, it's the highest above Sauvignon Blanc and Chenin Blanc. But that's not the point. The point is that there is a place for Chardonnay, and there's a category. I'm sure that you know from your shop that you can see the sales. As you mentioned, the awards underpins that. So it is about communication and getting the consumer to understand better what Chardonnay is about. It's not just anything but Chardonnay,
I think Chardonnay has found itself in a situation where it's so, as you said, established, and it represents such a tradition of wine, white wine, that it's easy to overlook the depth of quality in the Cape.
Yeah, if you go into the history of wine, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, and then Pinot Noir, these are the big names in the wine world. We're not discounting anything else like Chenin Blanc, which I've worked with a lot, and I love Chenin Blanc, but I think Chardonnay as a category is going to grow and is very interesting. Yeah, and the variety, the diversity that we have. I was at a Wines of South Africa tasting a couple of weeks ago at Creation, where we tasted 27 different brands, and some of them had 2 or 3 Chardonnays on the table, and you can definitely taste the slight differences. So one winemaker and 3 different vineyards, and that for me is interesting, because I worked in Burgundy, in Vougeot at Domaine Bretagne, and I worked with Corto Charlemagne and beautiful white Burgundies. But I can see that the approach has changed over the last 10, 15 years with South African Chardonnay, and it can compare with some of the best Chardonnays in the world. And that's something we're going to do as part of our plan, is we'll do comparative tastings to show that, because we're not ashamed about the wines. We believe in the wines, and that it's a great alternative to any other country in the world.
All strength to the association, and look forward to great events ahead.
Thank you very much.
Great.